Oh, okie dokie. So let me go ahead and give my thoughts. Here I go, moving the mic around. Okay. Let me give my thoughts on this. Why do people claim failed ideologies? An explanation. And look, this isn't even to dab on anybody. I'm just explaining why. So why do people call themselves Nazbols or national Bolshevists? Well, people call themselves that because they don't want to call themselves what they really are, which is probably more National Socialist or Nazi in some view. Or, they want the good bits of socialism without all the whole well, we're going to have to make amends for racial separations and for slavery and everything else. That's one of the biggest reasons. I think that a lot of folks just don't want to they just don't want to think about that. They don't want to talk about it. I don't either. But, I think there are plenty of folks who will say, no, I'm not racist. I just, I just want to have the good bits of socialism with, the nationalism and the stuff that already exists now. The reality is that you can't give up one thing without accepting other things, I think that's an important distinction, I think I was going to dab on other ideologies, but I mean, you could say the same thing with like left comms as well. It's like people call themselves left comms because they don't like MLs who talk about Stalin a lot. And so they call themselves that. Or people that, will, and Gaddafi was a great guy. I think he had his good bits and his bad bits. But I think that it's the same thing when people claim to be, third internationalists or something like that, or, third international theory. But it's like, the reason those folks want to do it is because it's like, well, I'll call myself this, but I'll have more ML aesthetics. But, it's the same thing that people call themselves Maoists. I guess this is turning into that sort of thing. But it's like, I've said this before about Maoists. It's like, my understanding of Maoism is this, is that, okay, so basically it comes from Gonzalo, over there in, the the Communist Party of Peru, or one of them, aka the Shining Path. And of course, all the crazy, wacky stuff that they did, including, shooting kids and everything else. But the thing is, though, is that, they'll be like, well, we don't like what he did, but it's like, well, what's being done over in the Philippines is a good thing. And it's just like, this is the same type of thing where it's like, well, well, the SS was actually an international force like NATO because they accepted, Italians and, everything else, man, It's like, of course, they were forced in to do that, but they're not going to really say that. But people make excuses for their ideologies, because as far as I know with Maoism, I'll go back to that, is, well, what Mao Zedong actually did was different than what he wrote about. And so that's Mao Zedong thought versus, apparently what he wrote about was okay. It's just like, they cope so hard about China today, and they're just like, well, it's Dengism and it's just, fascism, but we don't have anything against China. It's just like, you might as well just say, they're two steps away from just being a, U.S. intelligence shill because they just don't like how China became. But it's like, look, countries do what they have to do to survive. I know I'm making some very quick pivots and changes here, but the thing is, it's like, look, You can cope all day about, oh well, only if only Mao's followers had taken over this and that. If only Jiang Qing had taken over instead of Deng Xiaoping and all the all this sort of feihua. And it's like, look, you can play that game, and you can play that sort of what if, sort of alternate history. But it's like, look, China did what it had to do to survive. They couldn't just continue on with what Mao Zedong had done. That had run its course. And now China is becoming again an imperial power. And of course, I know. I mean, you could debate about, oh, it's not really imperialism, this and that. I've heard that with Caleb Bompin as well. Look, it is what it is. But China, in general, has always been a strong force. And I know people will say, but they never really served the people, this and that. Look, you can see it from different standpoints. But look, China was always a fairly strong nation. I still hold that view. It's always been a strong nation. And I think it's backwards, and it's somewhat, kind of, insulting to be like, well, they lived in poverty, this and that. Well, yeah, I mean, you could say that about large parts of China, but it was always a strong nation. And so I think that it's just one of those things where you're just like, okay, why are you so mad at it? What do you expect China to do? What do you expect them to do? It's like, well, now we're going to limit our forces, and we're going to, get rid of the billionaires completely, and we're going to go back to what? Go back to singing and go back to the rural doctors and all that. So it's just like, you can't go back to what it was. It's the same thing. It's like if you call yourself a Nazi, it's like, look, you're not going to go back. It's like that was the time that it was in. And of course, people can say, oh, well, Hitler was paid by the British agents and everything else like that. Okay. But it's like, even with Nazgul, whether it's the German version with Ernst Niekisch and Karl Otto Peitel and others, like I say, and Laufenberg and all those types, or even the Russian Nazgul with Limonov and Dugin and the others. But it's like, look, those answered for the time. What are we going to answer for today? This is why you have people like Culture Thug who, talk about, Nazism and everything else, but will also try to update himself and say, well, yeah, we're third positionists. And, we're going to have these sort of aesthetics, and we've actually laid out a plan. People can disagree with it. They can. But they have a plan. Do you see much of that from other groups? I don't know. I'm sure there is, but I don't think it's the same. It's even to half the same degree that it is right now, I just, it's just one of those things where it's like, people, I'll wrap it up with this. People claim a failed ideology either to try to rehabilitate it and basically to cover their own actual beliefs, or they want to do it to try to update it and use stuff from modern day, or use some obscure examples like what goes on in the Philippines to defend Maoism. And it's just like, look, you can go ahead and do that. But like I say, it serves those times. It's like, look, I think that people, like I say, political folks nowadays, and I'm guilty of it too, is that we spend so much time, and I've said this before, but we spend so much time trying to dig through books and pore over, all these sorts of things and say, oh, well, W.E.B. Du Bois would have agreed with me about socialism or about communism. It's like he supported communism to a point, but he was a Pan-Africanist. He hated labor unions because he was a proto Jay Sakai who said that, the white labor unions were racist. So it's like he was never completely on their side. It's like he supported the Japanese Empire for a time as well, but people never talk about that. It's the same thing with Umberto Eco. And they'll always talk about, the signs of fascism about Trump. And it's just like, yeah, if you read that, though, the signs of fascism bit that he wrote, he also says a bit, though, is that, the communists took advantage of things as well. And so he wasn't particularly enamored with those groups either. But people will say, yes, they were on my side. And they use these straw man things and say, yes, those people were on my side. It's just, and to me, that hasn't been particularly effective in my view. Yeah, it's easy to do that if you're a political spurg already on Twitter or already on Discord or whatever. Okay, but how do you convince ordinary people? That's the difference, isn't it? And like I say, I've tried not to say anybody's name or anything else like that because everybody, it appears, has moved on from the beef. But I'm just saying this as an example. Is that in general, you do not see, I'm referring to a very Americentric case here, but it's like you don't see these folks out there. You don't see PSL, as far as I know anyway, or DSA go into the projects of wherever they are at and say, hey, can we help you out? Hey, or this and that. Now, I know people will say, what about the anarchists that are trying to keep people from losing their homes? Well, yeah, that's true. Or giving mutual aid. I'll say, yeah, that's true. But how does that translate into them joining you? They'll say, yeah, thank you for helping me, or thank you for giving me this case of bottled water. But that doesn't mean they're going to join you. They're going to say, yeah, thank you. That doesn't mean I'm going to join you, though. People are selfish. And I think that it just goes to show how ridiculous it is, where, groups like the Boogaloo Boys, this and that, or even Proud Boys, they have fairly stringent, well, somewhat stringent, I should say, entrance into groups. I mean, the left does it as well, with PSL, where you have to, I already lost my place, but you have to take a test on Marx and his writings to, be entered into the party. And so I think that I just screwed up my point, didn't I? Oh, well. But I think it's difficult to see where we go from here. I think that people would rather have, I've repeated this before, but I think that people would rather have a circle jerk and just talk to those few folks who are true believers and just say, yeah, fuck the rest of those folks. Or, they would rather just say, I told you so, than actually go out there and actually work with folks and actually get a regular job. I don't know. And maybe it is happening. Maybe it is happening and I don't see it. Because, I'm just at home basically as well. I don't really go outside. But so I'm guilty of it. I am. But it's just interesting to see where it's going to go. There's so much stuff up in the air right now. And a lot of people are upset. They are. A lot of folks, coming into April, could be kicked out of their homes. So I think that once those deadlines are up, then we're going to see where it goes. And the only ones who are going to win are, gangs. And I'm not saying this is a racial thing necessarily, but, I would say that, various predatory groups are going to take advantage of these innocent folks. Well, relatively speaking, innocent. Innocent is a very subjective term in this case. Nobody's completely innocent, but to me, it's just it's easier for folks to read books and say, yeah, we could try to remake that today, than to actually try to understand how finances work, of how, this globalized system that we are in works. It's easier, than to speak in broad. It's easier to speak in broad general terms and speak in specifics about where you grew up at. And I'm sure that people will say, well, yeah, I know specifically about my area, this and that, but it's like in general, I just don't think it's happening. Anyway, I have gone on long enough about that rant and rave. I was trying to be fair. I was trying to be honest. I'm sure that I'll get some comments that will say, well, you didn't completely cover this. I'm trying to update here a little bit. I'm trying to be a little bit more fair. And I'm trying to give some original thoughts. Are they completely original? No. But I hope you'll enjoy this. And I'd love to see the comments regardless, and use that as a bit of criticism that'll hopefully make me a little bit better at my BS. Anyway, hope you'll enjoy. See you later. Goodbye.